Miller here from Target Test Prep. Today let's talk about how many questions you can get wrong or right to get a 655 on your GMAT. First, let's discuss the scoring. As you probably know by now, the GMAT is a computer adaptive exam. So what does that mean? It means it's not just about quantities of right and wrong. Remember, two test takers can get the same number of questions wrong across all the sections, but get different scores. Now, why is that? Well, because there's easy questions and then they range all the way up to hard questions. So if one student is getting more easy questions wrong than another student, but yet they're getting the same total number wrong, the one who got the easy questions wrong is going to get a lower score. So you have to keep that in mind when thinking about what needs to happen to get a 655, and also understand this isn't a perfect science. So I'm going to give you some guidelines today, but it can't be exact because remember, it's not just a quantity thing that determines your score, it's also a difficulty level. So please keep that in mind when analyzing your score. The other thing to keep in mind is that you can get the exact same section scores as, say, somebody else and still get a different overall score. So for example, a Q81, V84, and DI82 can get you either a 655 or a 665. Now, why is that? Well, when you look at those individual scores, let's just say a DI82. Well, you can be on the low end of that range or the high end of that range. You can almost look at it like a decimal number. So if you're on the high end of the range, well, that's probably going to get you closer to your 665. But if you're on the low end of that DI82 range, maybe that brings you down to a 655. So this is something else to keep in mind because a lot of times we see students comparing sectional scores and wondering why they didn't get the exact same score as someone else. That is why. Now let's get into what you need to do to get a 655. Keep in mind, this is not an exact science. Everything I said before is true. An exact section score doesn't, or a combination of section scores can't guarantee you a 655, but we can get close. What we've determined is a combined section scores of quant, DI, and verbal, when you add them up at a 247, more or less is going to get you to that score of 655. But let's talk about how you can get there with different types of section scores now. The first is a balanced score. So a balanced score between all three sections could be a Q84, V83, and a DI80. Now you might think, well, those numbers are off, but remember, the percentile rankings are pretty close. Now the question is, how do you get those scores? Well, for a Q84, we're talking about 3 quant questions wrong. For a V83, we're talking about 6 verbal questions wrong, so you can get more wrong in that section. And then finally, you can get about 7 DI questions wrong to get a DI80. Now again, that's give or take. We're talking about, you don't know the difficulty levels of those questions, but more or less, if you get that number of questions wrong in those sections, as we just discussed, you're going to be at about a 655. Now, I will caution you on this, and this is something that I'll say again at the end of the video to reiterate, but remember, on the test itself, you don't want to be trying to tally in your head how many questions you actually are getting wrong in real time. It's going to throw you off, it's going to distract you, but so what we're giving you here is just general numbers so you get an idea of what needs to happen on test day, how prepared you have to be on test day to get around a 655. But remember, don't try to do this in your head while trying to perform on the test. Now, another scenario. Really strong quant, because remember, all sections are weighted equally for your final score. So if you do really well in one section, you can do a little worse on the others. That's kind of cool with how the GMAT algorithm works and can really help you plan on how you're doing throughout your prep. So what does that strong quant score look like? We're talking about a Q87, V81, and DI79. So as that breaks down to what you can get wrong, we're talking about 2 quant questions missed. So that's not a lot. 8 verbal questions and 8 data insight sections. That's a total of 18 questions missed. And that should get you around a 655. And again, don't be trying to tally this in your head while you're on the GMAT. All right, another scenario, strong verbal to get you to a 655. So how does that look? We're talking Q80, V87, and DI80. Breaking that down by section, 4 quant questions you can miss, 4 verbal questions, so not a lot, and you could miss about 7 data insights questions. That's totaling you at 15 wrong questions across all the sections, and that should get you to about a 655. Let's talk about a scenario with a strong data insight section. So what we can get is a Q80, V80, and DI87. What does that break down to? About 4 quant questions missed, 9 verbal questions, so some leeway there, and only 4 data insights questions. That puts you at 17 questions wrong, and that puts you right around a 655. All right, so that kind of brings us to our conclusion of today's video. Some takeaways here are, look, the GMAT is computer adaptive. We know that, so there is no perfect science to what I described. Sure, we can get close and have an idea of what's going to bring us to a 655, but remember, if you get a bunch of easy questions wrong, that might change some of the data and what I was providing to you earlier. Now, there's also no single combination of scores. As you see, you could do balance, strong quant, strong verbal, strong DI. So basically, it can change depending on how you do in each section. But what we're saying is around a 247 total will get you a 655. Lastly, don't try to figure this out on test day. This is just information for you to have beforehand. It's not a perfect science, and so it's not something you want to be worrying about in test while you're just trying to perform to the best of your ability. But yes, having that knowledge going in should make you feel good about what you can do to get that 655 score. And of course, everything you need to do leading up to test day is in many of our past videos, so feel free to check them out. And thank you for watching today. I had a blast talking about all this with you. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to our channel. There'll be more. Leave comments for us because there's so many more things I'd love to discuss. Happy studying, everybody, and we'll all talk soon.